So social media is ruining society, eh?
That and more when we get back to Standard Humans, episode 537. Hello, everyone.
Welcome back to part 2 of this dual episode on social media.
And the book, Jaron Lanier's 10 Reasons Why You Should Delete Your Social Media Right Now.
10 arguments for deleting your social media accounts right now.
Good enough. Yeah, as we said, this is a 2-part episode. Let's go over a little bit of a recap from the last episode of what the previous 5 reasons were.
Yeah, for sure. So just to recap the last episode real quick, there are 10 arguments in this book. We went through the first 5 last time, which were you're losing your free will, quitting social media is the most finely targeted way to resist times, social media is making you into an asshole, social media is undermining truth, and social media is making what you say meaningless.
Very interesting. And I feel like a lot of those, just from the name, you can sort of get it, but some of them are a little bit deeper than the name suggests. So, again, would recommend going back to the last episode.
Yeah, and I would definitely also recommend reading the book if you want to find out more. Jaron has been in and around the social media and tech scene a long time and might have been able to explain some of the reasons slightly better than I can. You know, it's different takes, different experiences, but
mildly.
But yeah, so today we wanted to go through the next 5 arguments, talk about them a little bit, and maybe talk about some of our own ideas on how to fix or deal with social media better in your life.
And you were saying that 2 out of 5 of these require some mental gymnastics to really get around. So prepare your brain. I'm preparing mine. I'm gonna be a little confused.
Yeah, we can try and go through the book slowly together with them. I'll do some reading from them, but there's a little bit of economics and spirituality that is a little bit beyond my ability to talk about off the top of my head or understand fully.
Back on your, 24 strength?
Yeah.
Isn't spirituality one of the lowest 2 or something?
I think it might have been bottom of the barrel, so that checks out, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that explains it. I think it was one of your, was it one of your bottom ones too?
No, I think it was at least mid, if not upper.
Okay.
Yeah, at least I should hope so. I don't really remember. Watch it be my bottom 3.
I don't think the audience actually knows either.
Did we not show them?
No, because those are from the Science of Wellbeing, right? And we never finished that series, and I was waiting for us to finish the series before I started publishing them.
Oh, so they're still just in the bank.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah, we should finish that at some point.
We should finish that at some point. Wow, teaser.
I think you legit stopped right before some of the best content, I think, too.
No, I got to, I think it was on week 5.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I learned about resetting your baselines and stuff like that, some interesting stuff like that. But I'm sure there's much better stuff to come.
You're legit so close to finishing it. It's just week 5, 6, maybe 7. I think just even 5 and 6, and then it's just the big activity.
I really need to do that. Back to the current subject.
Yeah, so shall we get into it?
Yeah, let's jump right in.
All right, so the next problem with social media, or specifically bummer social media, which, just to recap, because I have a hard time remembering that. I doubt anybody else does either. It was that, do I not have it written down on this piece of paper?
Oh, no. Wait,
there it is. It's on a different piece of paper. All my papers got mixed up the other day because I spilled a bunch of water on them and had to dry them out.
Oh. That's unfortunate.
Yeah. So, I mean, it makes great, crinkly sounds now because they're all, ruffled up. But anyway.
I was actually going to say. Sounds like you're leafing through some parchment.
There's only, 6 pieces of paper here, but, they're so, water damaged that they make good noises now, which is good. It's probably good for the podcast. I'm sure people appreciate this. Anyways, so bummer means behaviors of users modified and made into an empire for rent. So the business model of companies where they change the behaviors and opinions of its users based on whatever the advertisers or the people who are giving them money want. It's just like a turnkey way to change people's behaviors.
As another recap, the big five tech companies, Amazon, Google, Apple, Microsoft, and Facebook.
Yes.
You said that Amazon, Microsoft, and Apple only dabble in Bummer for part of their revenue, but for Google and Facebook, it's something like in the 90% of what they do.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of time when we're saying these things, we are very much talking about Facebook and Google. Those are the two examples that you should probably be thinking of if you need concrete examples of all of the terrible things that social media or Bummer in general does. So with all that recap being said, let's get into it. So argument 6 is that social media is destroying your capacity for empathy.
That seems, at face value, seems opposite.
Oh, really?
Well, because it seems like since you're able to connect with so many more people, like not get to know necessarily, but learn so much about people living elsewhere in the world that you might not have gotten exposed to otherwise, it seems like you would have more empathy. But what's his argument for it?
Yeah, I don't remember that he really touches on that. I think it definitely has the potential, if you're really intentionally trying to get that, to serve that purpose of seeing other people's realities. But generally, when you go onto one of these platforms like Facebook or Google, you're searching for something, what you get is essentially a personalized reality. They're showing you what you want to see. And that's happening for every single person. So there isn't really a common ground or a shared reality on these platforms. Everybody's living in their own bubble, seeing their own news and facts and all that jazz. And the empathy depends on being able to really relate with what other people are experiencing. But if you're living in what is effectively a different reality, like you're seeing completely different things, you have no idea what other people are actually seeing or being exposed to on a daily basis. When you can't understand those experiences at all, just because Facebook is only serving that content to them and not to you, then you lose the ability, or your ability to empathize is weakened or worse off than it was before.
They touched on that heavily in The Social Dilemma. That was a good little meme they had where the extreme political motivators were for the extreme centrists.
That was great, yeah.
That was pretty great. But I mean, this is an American movie, so I imagine it's to do with their Democrat and Republican. But they said, there's one quote that's, I don't remember the exact words, but it's something to the effect of, because so much of the information you absorb every day is pigeonholing into one side or one facet of the political sphere, then to you it seems so clear that these are the correct ideas, and you don't understand how anybody could be so wrong and so stupid to believe other vastly different ideas.
Yeah, 100%.
It then led into the ideas about increased tribalism and increase middle ground right on the political scale, polarizing, increased polarization of just lay people.
Yeah, that was interesting to see that graph over time of, I guess, right-wing and left-wing people in the US, and where I think it was the medium people were on the graph, and it varied. It got farther apart, got closer together up until around when social media was made, when it got hella far apart.
Yeah, vastly spread into two separate groups, which I thought was very interesting. Because then I guess it would just be to do with, I believe in the United States, you have to register to be either a Democrat or Republican, which I don't entirely understand.
You do the same thing here, I think.
I mean, I voted. I didn't register as anything.
Oh, you don't have to do that. down there, I don't believe.
Oh, okay.
But I think it's the same idea as here, in that you can probably you can be registered to be part of one of the parties as just kind of I don't know, I guess a general member or something. And I know down in the States that enables you to vote in the primaries to kind of pick the candidate or whatnot. But then for the general election, you don't have to be either or. And I actually don't know, but I assume it's probably similar here. I don't know how like the leads of the parties get elected, but I know that you definitely can be members of the party. I think my grandparents were both part of like one of the parties. Like they were just members.
That's very interesting. But I imagine it's like once your Google, Facebook history sort of catches on to a trend that you're probably leaning towards one side or the other of the political scale, it'll start sending you loads of content that'll drive you farther and farther, whichever side.
And you can actually see what Facebook thinks that you prefer. It was interesting. Did you check out anybody else's ad interests on the Facebook activity?
Yeah. So, like we talked about, mine were three things: pets, the general concept of pets,
Yeah.
Time magazine, and some 19th century British poet. I forget his name. Wait, Alfred Tennyson. So those were mine. Very inaccurate, I would say, which I think is good, and very few. But I looked up Sangi's. She had loads. She had like 30 at least, for some reason. Like, why do you think she had more?
Does she actually use Facebook like on a regular basis?
Maybe. Like, it's not like her main. She uses Instagram a lot more,
but she'll still maybe go on occasionally, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah, because I had the exact same experience looking at Jess's. She probably had like 100 in there or something. I don't think she uses it all that often, but like enough that it just started adding up. And yeah, I think those are both more typical use cases than ours, because I don't think we really use Facebook at all. And I've usually had like the privacy settings maxed.
Yeah, same. And I can't remember the last time that I was just like, let's see what's going on Facebook.
Yeah, and you can actually tell, going back to the politics, what party it thinks you prefer, because when you go in under one of the tabs in ad interests, I think it's culture or something, it'll say if you like the Democrats or the Republicans, or it'll say if you're like the Liberals, NDP, Conservatives, or whatever.
La Québécois. Okay, I'll have to check that after. But yeah, for Sangis, she had loads, like I would say at least 30. And some of them were questionable, but I would say most were pretty accurate.
Yeah, I think it was the same with Jess. There was some really weird ones, like a couple, but for the most part, like there were so many, and most of them were like okay, at least, which is kind of the point.
Hers were kind of eerily specific. Like it.
Oh yeah.
Seemed to know that she was into working out. A bunch of different exercises that she would do came up. Vegetarianism came up, and she's been a vegetarian her whole life. And then something like born in India but living abroad came up. And I'm like, what the hell? How did it know that?
Yeah, I don't know. That could be an easy explanation, the last one, in that maybe she changed where she was living in like her profile, but
she moved when she was like 1.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
So something like that. It wasn't exactly that, but I'm like, what? How does it know?
Yeah, it makes a couple of really good guesses. But that's kind of the idea, is that it's essentially just A/B testing to see what you engage with. And if it thinks you might like something, it'll add it in. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. But overall, the house always wins. The odds are stacked in their favor.
Because you'll find something you like.
Exactly, yeah. I forget, there was one like sea creature that came up like 3 or 4 times, but I forget which one now.
Sea creature?
Yeah.
Like an eel.
Something like that. I forget exactly what.
But yeah, empathy, anyway.
Yeah, so going back to it, if it has already decided what party you're part of or what you think about this or that the example from the movie about climate change in the Google search engine, how it gives you different results based on what it guesses you think will be the right answer. So if it thinks that you're for the idea of climate change, wait, no. Not pro climate change, but
like you believe in
you
the
believe
idea
in
of
climate change. Yes, I am
Yeah,
pro climate change. It's
Woo!
about time this world heated up a notch.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, if it thinks you're, say, more left leaning or you live in a specific area, it'll talk about why climate change is so terrible and why we have to make drastic changes to change it. But if you live in the generally more conservative area, maybe, then it will say that it is a hoax, or it'll give you a bunch of myths about it or all
Not
that
that
jazz.
bad.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just based on who it thinks you are. You'll get like a different reality.
That is quite something. I'm going on here to access your information, see what political party it thinks I belong to.
I don't think it does, because you only had the 3, right?
Oh, it is in your interest.
It is in the interests, yeah. Yeah, it was in the interest. So it didn't have it for me, and I don't think it would have it for you either. I don't think Facebook had enough information collected on either of us to make a guess.
Ah, okay.
Because that was exactly why I downloaded it in the first place, but I couldn't find it for myself.
Yep. Pets, Time Magazine, and Lord Alfred Tennyson.
That's essentially all your interests.
I'm actually quite pleased that it's minimal amount and dead wrong about who it thinks I am. I mean, I like pets, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's another thing to note. For all the people who are going to go and download their information and take a look at all of the interests that Facebook thinks you have, don't necessarily delete things that are wrong, because by doing that, you're just enhancing its ability to manipulate you. So maybe just leave in the things, unless they're really disturbing or weird, just leave them in. Let it keep guessing.
That goes a little forwards in making as we were saying before, making us sound a little more than a little tinfoil hatty. You have an advantage over the machine. Keep your advantage. But
I mean, I don't disagree with you, but I don't think it's unreasonable to say that is the business model, right? It is to manipulate you, to change, or specifically change your behavior, opinions. And I don't think that's something that most people want.
I mean, I'm not going to be changing those ad interests it thinks I have. What ad interest could Lord Alfred Tennyson possibly have?
Classical books?
He died in like 1890.
No? Maybe it'll give you more, I don't know, chapters ads or something.
Maybe,
yeah.
That one's just stayed with me because I'm like, I don't understand why him.
I know you're not gonna, but it'd be kind of funny to just scroll Facebook for a while and see if you get any ads that are even remotely related to that.
Yeah, like, did you really like Ulysses?
Or even delete the other 2 and just have that.
Yeah, true. I'm not interested in pets, not interested in Time Magazine. Only interested in Lord Alfred Tennyson. Just give me the Tennyson, man.
Man, I hope that there's somebody out there who's advertising specifically to that audience.
Yeah, that's me. I'm the audience. Come get me.
But yeah, there you go. Argument 6: social media destroying your capacity for empathy.
And another point on that one. We're going to be moving on soon because we need to save some brain power for the 2 that are really confusing, apparently. But I did hear somebody whose identity I will not disclose because I think they're a very smart, like, caring person. So, but what the quote is I think anyone who voted for X political party is sort of a bad person, which I think that comes heavily from the manipulation of media. Because
100%.
If we Google some certain politicians from some certain countries, we'll pretty much only get results like, look at this goof that they did. Look at this dumb thing they did, this dumb thing they said. But if somebody who has another search history, who has another location where they might be more positive to that person, because because Google thinks it's in your interest, it'll say, ooh, look at this person's achievements, look at this person's whatever. So I think that comes almost exclusively from, your social media internet tracking history changing your perspective.
I got a hard agree there. Yeah.
Maybe not exclusively, but I think a lot.
Yeah, no, not exclusively. I think it's coming back to the idea again, a difference in quantity is a difference in quality.
Explain that one again.
Essentially, if there's some way to quantify how bad the situation is, if it increases enough, it gets to like a new level, essentially. It becomes a whole new level of issue.
Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah, so it's existed before. There were people for most of humanity who've been very tribal and dealt with that stuff. But it feels like it's at a whole new level now.
Just because it's people, instead of your own local political riding, even your own country, it's the entire earth. It's sort of plugged in and connected.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. Number 6, social media is destroying your empathy.
And moving on to number 7. Argument number 7. Social media is making you unhappy. Sad.
That one I feel like we hear a lot.
Yeah.
Before you explain the argument for it, do you remember that video? It was making the rounds on Facebook and YouTube and stuff. I think it came out in about like 2012 or something. It was called Look Up.
Yeah, I knew you were about to say that. Yeah.
Whatever happened to that?
I think the guy's still around. Yeah.
But it's so funny how it's circulated on social media. Everyone's like, yeah, man, go live your life not staring at a screen. Anyway, I'm going to share this on Facebook.
I know, right? That is just some of the best irony, really.
I know. So good.
It really was.
Sorry, guy. Didn't work out.
Yeah, not so much, alas. Like, I agree with the idea behind it, but...
For sure.
I mean, I guess moving off of the current topic a bit, you almost kind of have to go through social media to spread the message of social media is bad, right? Because that's where all the social media users are.
That is true, but I feel like the irony is in... Not the irony necessarily. I feel like the message was lost in almost everyone. Not even lost, like they understood, but they just didn't follow it.
Yeah. Yeah, it didn't actually spark any change because of the medium it's in.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same, but I do agree that if you anti-social media, it should be expressed on social media because for the same reason where I think if you disagree with all your local political parties, you should get involved in politics because stuff like that you can really only change from the inside.
Though, actually, I might roll back the statement a bit specifically because Jaron Lanier, either in the book or in the movie, did specifically say that you don't actually have to be on social media, that you need to use alternative mediums to try and spread the message. And I don't exactly know what the best medium that is for just in general. For him, it seems to be the book, sometimes going on TV and doing interviews, sometimes doing things like that movie. For us, maybe it's podcasts, but it's just finding other better mediums.
I guess I wouldn't call... Yeah, I guess podcasting is not a social media. But I don't know. I'll have to think about that. I would think maybe you would have to go on social media if you really wanted. Ooh, that's a difficult one, actually.
Yeah, especially if you're actually engaging with social media, because then you're actively succumbing to all the terrible things about social media, right? You're losing the ability to empathize with the people you're talking about. You're probably going to become slightly more of an asshole, right? And that's probably tainting your message a bit.
It sort of calls into question where's the limit of your responsibility? Is it just to yourself, or is it to your circle of people, or is it to all people? To help, I guess.
I don't know that I'd agree with that. I mean, yes, that's a very interesting topic, but I think what I'm trying to get at, or what Jaron was trying to get at, was that you need to find different ways to help all people, or larger than your circle of people, like ways that aren't bummer media. And as I think about it more, I become more convinced of that again, because because of all the problems with social media, you lose all the context and the meaning behind what you're saying, and you lose all the empathy and all that. other mediums are probably significantly better at getting the message across. And if you get it to a few people, a few more people, and more people, and more people, I don't know that anything can grow as fast outside of social media. I mean, maybe there are ways, but it's probably better progress or more sustainable progress when the message isn't delivered through social platforms.
That is true. I do think sustainable progress is a large part of that, because I always say there's about a 2-week, maybe 1 month, if you're lucky, span of interest for issues on social media. There'll be about 2 weeks where if a new crisis comes up, everyone will be like, oh my God, this is the biggest thing that has ever happened in the world. You must do something. You must do something. And then 2 weeks later, nobody's done anything. It's still going on, but nobody talks about it. Up to maybe 1 month if it's a really big thing. But if it doesn't affect them in their direct daily lives, most of social media will forget about stuff within a month. But I mean, if people buy a book, they just own the book.
It'll actually exactly be like the kid in the movie who tried to put down his phone for like a week and gave up after like 2 or 3 days after he saw a notification, right? That's exactly what people will probably do if they see a message and decide to make a change based off of something on social media. Like if they see look up, they're going to put it down for maybe a day if they're doing really well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of true. Wow, aren't we sick compared to everyone on social media? We're so much better.
Up here on the high horse.
Yeah, those peasants. No, anyway, but I do think it is a good message.
Very good message, yeah. So anyway it's spread is good, but it's probably better to avoid spreading it through the social media.
Yeah, like if you're against fossil fuels, it's probably best not to take a Chevy truck to all your public talks.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I think it's the same kind of thing.
Oh, okay, I see, yeah.
Yeah.
You need to actually walk the walk instead of just talking the talk.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, that resolves it for me.
Very good. All right, glad we got that figured out.
Crisis averted. So, point number 7.
That it's making you unhappy.
So what's his actual one that he goes into for it? His actual argument? Because we always hear those, social media makes you, if you look at a man who's really muscular, you'll be like, oh, I'm not that muscular. But I feel like movies and TV shows and stuff like that also do that. So I'm going to need something else, you know?
Movies and TV shows aren't with you 24/7 every day, I think is a difference.
That's
there.
true.
Yeah, because they definitely can, but it doesn't seem like he gets too much into detail other than his specific, like, being slightly less happy, which was...
It's like anecdotal.
He starts it off with citing a bunch of stuff that, to be honest, I haven't read yet, but I probably will when I'm making the show notes, and I'll link it all.
Okay.
Because it's actually just like a sentence here with 6 different citations in it. It's like, and yet science reveals, citation, the citation, truth, citation, research, citation, shows a world that is not more connected, citation, but instead suffers from a heightened sense of isolation, citation. It's like there's a lot of citations in here that I will link to, but
I'm assuming that his citations are accurate and reliable, but it seems as if that relates to my point as well, that shouldn't social media make you more empathetic and more connected to the people around the world because you can see into their daily lives? Apparently, no. Again, assumptions stated that his citations are accurate and reliable.
You know what? I think I found a pretty good section. So let me just read a chunk of it. Of course, bummer will make you unhappy, but how? The particular form of unhappiness will be tailored to you as a matter of course. The people who run the bummer companies need never find out what brought you down. That is for you to know your last privacy. You might become anxious that you're not as attractive or successful as other people you're exposed to, even as you're harnessed by the system to make someone out there feel the same way. Based on the research, there are trends in the form that unhappiness takes, so I could guess about what's going on in you. You might have less sex than you seek in proportion to the amount of time you use apps to seek sex. You're sitting there swiping a screen. You might spend less time with your family in proportion to the cuteness of the presentation of your family life you put out there on social media. You might be at risk for self-harm in proportion to your social media use, especially if you're a young woman. You might be making traumatic experience worse by using social media. You might be losing self-esteem even as you express yourself. I could guess, but that's not the approach I'm going to take here. I don't know you. Research only reveals statistical tendencies. You might be the exception. It's not my job to make guesses about what's right for you.
As well, that one he said was funny. What was it? You might be having less sex than...
You might have less sex than you seek in proportion to the amount of time you use apps to seek sex.
That's funny because...
And that one has a citation.
Well, the citation might be a thing I've read that people now are having much less sex than they were about 50 years ago. And apparently it's due to the lessened amount of monogamous relationships.
Wow, yeah, I clicked on the citation and the first couple paragraphs are exactly that. It's talking about more premarital sex.
Interesting. Like, I just from thoughts and reading the paper, it's like, if you're in a sexual relationship, probably like once a week minimum, twice a week, probably like 2 to 5 times a week is like average. So if you were smashing 2 to 5 times a week as a single man, that's nuts.
That's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, Tinder's probably making people smash less because they're like, I should just be single so I can keep doing this,
So, yeah, this is from a new study by SDSU psychology professor Jean Twen shows a generational shift in beliefs about sex and sexuality. And the quote down here at the bottom says, millennials are more accepting of premarital sex than any previous generation, yet have had fewer sexual partners than Gen Xers. This is consistent with their image as a tolerant, individualistic generation, accepting others' choices and making their own, Twenge said.
That's kind of funny.
Yeah, so there you go.
Good stuff.
Well, not really, but it might.
Well, not for people.
Not for people in general.
But interesting stuff.
Very interesting.
Yeah. What was the original point again?
It was that social media is making you unhappy.
Oh, that it was making you unhappy.
So yeah,
we're still, holy cow, yeah.
I think the general point is there's a bunch of different ways that it could do it. Based on like statistics, you're probably falling into at least a couple of them. I don't know which one it is for you individually, listener, but it probably is. I think that's a good guess.
Probably. And to draw on some knowledge from the science of well-being as well, you probably just subconsciously like focus on stuff where it's like, oh, that person is doing better than me, that person's doing better than me, and like all the stuff you see, and are less likely to remember stuff where it's like, oh, I am doing better than that person at whatever they're doing.
I think that's back to the growth hacking, is using your psychology against you to try and get you more in the platforms, more engaged.
Which point was that?
I don't think that was a point. That's hacking. That was part of one of the first two, I think. That was part of the explanation. One of the definitions he gave. Because that is apparently one of the industry terms is growth hacking, which is hacking the human psychology, essentially exploiting the weaknesses to get more engagement or attention out of people.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, that's number 7. So moving on then, argument number 8 is that social media doesn't want you to have economic dignity.
Is this one of the...
Yeah, this is one of the things where I don't remember / fully understand it well enough, I think, to do justice to the explanation. It has a lot to do with gig work and the free and open software movement.
Sorry? Wait, gig
work.
What is that?
Yeah, that's like freelance and all that stuff. How that's becoming a big trend now instead of just regular employment. Yeah, so it's essentially the idea is instead of being an actual employee, you're some kind of contractor or part-time person who works a little bit on a project. And that's just somehow related, or it came up at the same time in large part as this like free and open software movement, which is when all of the companies started up. So they were creating these businesses around the idea that they would be free. And the idea that they came up with for paying people was that they would pay people to essentially solve problems on almost like a bounty basis, it seemed, and not so much paying them regularly. Again, I think I'm not doing this particularly good justice, so I would encourage people to read the book. But
yeah, I feel like I would need to read the chapter as well.
yeah, apologies to everyone
I feel
who
like it's
is
a lot
more
of
confused now. But
yeah, I feel like it's a lot of ideas that were propagated on social media or by social media companies for their type of employment, but I don't know.
yeah, maybe we can come back to it another time if I reread the chapter a couple times. But for now, I think even just for the sake of time, we've been going for a while. Let's just leave it at the fact that it's that they don't want you to have economic dignity. That's the title is just there. We can take it or leave it for now. All right, next point. I think I'm going to be able to explain slightly better.
Is this a spiritual one or is that number 10?
No, that's number 10. Argument 9 is that social media is making politics impossible.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and we've touched on, I think, a lot of the issues with it, but there is a whole nother level that he talks about that really makes politics impossible, which is essentially that it brings out these really old and terrible parts of society that almost didn't exist before.
Really old.
Really old, yeah. And the way this happens is that he actually goes through a bunch of different examples of different social movements that have happened on social media, from the Arab Spring to the LGBTQ movement to Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm.
And the fundamental idea is that when movements like these come out, it's initially really great because, again, there are good things, or there are points to social media, right? You can get the word out, you can spread messages, group people together, all that jazz. And what initially happens, as with the LGBTQ movement, they managed to get gay marriage, which is fantastic. And they were able to
gay
achieve
marriage in
that.
the US?
Yeah. Just in general.
Yeah,
But in
yeah.
the US specifically, he is talking about, yeah.
Because in Canada it was before.
That is very true. Yes, we are, of course, a very intellectual species, far better than the US. But yeah, the idea is partly through the help of social media, they're able to organize and achieve some great things that are very positive for society.
Yeah.
But again, it comes back to this idea that these platforms are all about manipulation, right? They take what happens on the platform and they try and monetize it however they can.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is, over time, as these movements exist on social media and the algorithm has time to process it and see a bunch of different variations on it and expose those different variations to different people, it starts to understand better what parts of that movement will really trigger people, either good or bad. And what he really gets into here is the bad, that it'll find the parts of these movements that are often all about like change of some kind, and it will show the parts that are, how do I say this, like more drastic or more scary to some people, maybe.
It'll show the most shocking or parts that people will either be super passionately for or against.
Yes, exactly. And it will find the people who will react the most to that, and who will react the most
Either for or
drastically
against.
to that. Exactly. And it will show that to them. And that will bring up racist, sexist, all that jazz people or tendencies that have not existed in popular culture or in like the mainstream culture for a long time. That, you know, maybe it's been gone, maybe it's been simmering beneath the surface. I don't know. But it hasn't been in the mainstream up until social media had enough time to look over these movements and show it to the right people.
That is fascinating.
So then what happens after that is that it's kind of downhill from there for the movements oftentimes, because people who are against it for some reason or another start to be able to organize better, or the bad parts of social media are able to get more effective. Like one of the subtitles he has here that kind of comes up and up a few times throughout the book is neither left nor right, but down. That it doesn't matter politics or sides or whatever. It's just whoever's the worst, like most degrading, that's what's going to spread the fastest and the most. And that's what's going to come out of basically everything, all of the macro interactions on social media.
That's very interesting. So if, as a broad sort of thing, if you're tending towards the conservative side of the political scale and there's some sort of social justice movement going on, it'll likely show you the preachy, virtue signaling fake people who may be part of it. And if you're tending towards the liberal side of the political scale, it'll likely show you the most racist, bigoted people who are against that movement. And so it sort of, again, just goes to polarization and tribalism.
Yeah, basically. And it'll find the people who are going to react the most to the most extreme examples. And then once it's gotten that first wave, apparently more advanced people get involved, like people who actually understand how to manipulate the system can start to play or start to pay or to tweak people's interactions or their opinions, their behavior and all that stuff, and start to play with all the people who are being really enraged by some of the stuff. And it just gets to like another level, even past that already terrible first one.
So it will take a social movement, this point number 9, social media, bomber companies, whatever, will take a social movement and the side of it will show to its users. It has been boiled down to its most volatile, polarizing components, thereby forcing people to either be completely for or completely against these political, social stances that they see.
Yeah, pretty much. So wow, that just makes me think right now that if you see something about some party or movement or whatnot that you think you disagree with on social media, the post is probably absolute nonsense and doesn't represent whatever's happening at all.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a good enough assessment to be a general rule of thumb, but that might be more common than you would think.
A lot of these things are difficult to say do your own research because your research would almost entirely probably be on Google, which is the source of this sort of dilemma. And as well, some of these movements we're talking about that exist today exist purely on social media, pretty much. Purely on social media and or like Google accessing things.
Yeah.
So how are you supposed to really find a way to observe or research these movements without going on to Google or social media?
You know what? Why not? Let's get into some of that. I mean, you don't have to use Google. The people seem to think that's the only search engine.
DuckDuckGo.
It's not. I would recommend DuckDuckGo. That's just a hot tip. It's great. But honestly, there's so many search engines and I can't tell that much of a difference between the results of most of them. Like there's definitely some difference, but there's not like a different level of quality. It just feels slightly different.
Because it's not tailored as much, probably.
So definitely check out like DuckDuckGo. You can just change it in your browser settings. It's pretty easy to do. I will leave a link in the show notes, of course.
Does DuckDuckGo engage in bummering?
No, it does not, actually. I'll quickly say that.
Oh, very nice.
Google makes its money on the Google search engine by showing you ads based on who you are, basically. Who it thinks you are, it will just show you ads based on what it thinks you will want to see. DuckDuckGo's business model is also to show you ads, but it's just based off of what you're searching for. So if you're searching for boats, then it'll show you some ads for some boats. And then if you search for, I don't know, pillows or some shite, then it'll probably show you some ad for pillows, but it's not going to track you or remember that stuff. So there's still ads, which like isn't ideal, but it's not bummer, right? I shouldn't say that it's not ideal because that's actually a good business model that's sustainable and is better for society. I just don't like seeing ads.
Yeah, like if you're like searching where to find, like I would like to buy a golden retriever. Hey, this is a dog breeder who has golden retrievers.
Yeah, that's actually genuinely useful. So I think that's good. It's much better.
I feel like that's actually how most people, upon not researching it or stuff like that, think Google works.
I don't know. It seems like more people are getting aware of the shit that goes on, because I think a lot of people are noticing that after you search for something, you then start seeing that ad everywhere.
It's kind of scary. Like,
yeah.
And it's cross-platform. Like if you search for something on Google, you'll find it on YouTube and Facebook.
Yeah, I think the two main advertisers are Google and Facebook. I couldn't say offhand what percentage of all advertisements come from there, but I think I'm going to feel pretty comfortable guessing that might be the majority of ads is between those two people. So when you see ads on almost any website, there's a very good chance that it's coming from either Facebook or Google, and it's feeding them information about what you're doing or a little bit about who you are, so that it's better able to track you across different sites. So Google ads are usually what you're seeing when you're seeing ads, I think, even just around the internet.
Makes sense. But we were on a different tangent. What was that?
Oh, we were talking about how social media is making politics impossible.
No, but...
Oh, after that, we were talking...
Oh, yeah, how some movements that, like, do your own research to find out if you agree or disagree or what you think of these movements. But some of them exist purely on social media and Google.
So I don't know how good my next suggestion is going to be for specifically researching something very specific, but I'm going to give out this tip now because I feel like it's a pretty good one, and I think it fixes some of the problems that just deleting your social media doesn't, which is to get a newspaper.
I actually do that a lot, and I quite enjoy it, so I'm for it.
Yeah, it's quite good because one of the things we keep on saying, or that I've mentioned a few times in this episode, is that there's no common reality or common ground between people, but there used to be, in that people would read the same newspapers or even watch the same 3 TV channels or whatnot. So by just getting a credible newspaper, you are getting what is still a biased source of information, but as long as you check it out and make sure that they have a good relationship with the truth, which, quick side note, our Canadian newspapers all seem pretty good, or at least all the mainstream ones.
Oh, that's quite nice.
Like I went to a couple of those like bias and fact check things and like searched them up, and apparently like the Globe, what's the other one? The National or whatever.
Citizen?
There's the Citizen too. There's the second national one. National Post? I think that's it. The Citizen, the Toronto Star, they all have really good relationships or like track records on being really factful. Mild bias, especially in the opinions, but...
What they publish, like what they choose to publish, is essentially how they like would be more varying on the political scale or whatever, but if they publish it, it's probably true.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's obviously the opinion pieces, which are opinions, but they label that, at least in the Globe. So you can just avoid that if you don't want it. But yeah, so for the most part, you're getting actual accurate, or as far as we know, up to the current date, truthful or factful information. So, which is not the same as on social media, where misinformation spreads 6 times as fast as actual facts and information.
Okay, 2 things.
Yes.
I know you got that stat from somewhere, but where did you get it from?
I think he said it in the book.
Okay.
Editing, Aiden will try and find the citation and put it in the show notes.
And as well, for myself and any viewers who might be interested, what are these fact check sources that you did? Because I would like to do that for newspapers and stuff that I read, but I've never heard of that.
I think there were 2. I just looked up. I'd say Google, but we've just talked about how DuckDuckGo is superior, so I DuckDuckGo'd.
You binged it.
Media fact check. Honestly, Bing's probably better. I actually don't know, and there's a few things that come up, like media bias fact check. There's this one, mediabiasfactcheck.com, which is very to the point. It just has papers and it rates them on their factfulness and tells you a little bit about their bias. And I think there was another one that I used too that I looked them all up on. I think you have to be a little bit more careful if you're in the US, because I've heard people say, oh, you should just watch both CNN and Fox News, and then you get both sides of the story, and then you're more informed. But apparently they both have slightly dodgy relationships with the truth, so you should actually just pick other newspapers that are better.
Well, other news channels, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Or just skip the news and read newspapers.
Yeah, to be honest, I think papers might be the best medium for news. Not in terms of like an economic model for the newspapers so much as, but in terms of actually getting good information. I think that might be the best.
Like reading something and being like, this is true.
Yeah, exactly. And it avoids a lot of the problem with TV news nowadays with the 24/7 news cycle. And there's not something interesting happening all 24/7 hours a day. So I assume they're just like filling time all the time, right?
Oh, so just like sometimes like random bullshit, like, hey, this little girl has a really cute lemonade stand.
Or it's not even that. That's kind of adorable, and I don't mind that so much as just trying to like milk every last bit of content out of every situation or tragedy or whatnot.
Okay.
It's all that nonsense about like bringing debate people together and all that jazz. Whereas in a newspaper, they still have a lot of space. Like I've been getting the newspaper for few weeks, and I can't read it all, right? There's a lot of shit in there, but like there's still only so much space. And there is actually just prime real estate, and none of the stuff is moving, and it's just less clickbaity and repulsive overall, I find.
Very interesting. I usually just, my experience, I would always pick up the free school newspaper whenever I was around on campus and I saw a new one. It was usually, I don't know, approximately once a week because that's when the new ones come out. But I'll try reading actual newspapers as well to get informed of not just stuff that's going on in my uni.
Yeah, I actually don't mind it so much. I know we talked about news a few episodes back, I think. And one of the things that you mentioned was wanting to be informed of any like thing that's going to happen in a history textbook, I think, or anything that's going to be in a history textbook, because that's just important to know about.
Oh, yeah. And it would be in the newspaper.
Exactly, yeah. And I was kind of against that because it's like, I'm not going to check the news. But I've been finding, okay, if I get like a newspaper once a week, that's actually that's an okay amount of news, I find.
Because then you can read through it through the entire week, and then, you'll know everything pretty much up to date. You'll be about a week behind, but then the next week you'll get a new one. So you'll always be about a week max behind.
Yeah, I think the main problem with newspapers that people generally have is that it's yesterday's news. But I see that more of an advantage because you actually have more time to think about and analyze the situation, or the people writing it do, than they would if they were on TV or on the radio or something. So you actually get a slightly more, considered opinion.
Exactly, yeah.
Which I think is better, especially if you're not directly involved in the situation. You can probably afford to wait a little bit.
Which usually you aren't.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's hot tip for everyone. Get a newspaper.
Even, newspapers have websites, so you can just read it on there too if you want.
It's true. I don't know. I still don't love it.
Like, I'm not going to. I prefer the physical newspapers for sure. But if you're somebody who's like, oh, I don't want to pay for it or whatever, they have websites as well where you can read almost everything. So
actually, surprisingly enough, it was basically the same price to get the Globe and Mail paper as it was to get the digital version. And like with the paper, you get both.
What do you mean?
It was the exact same price to just get the digital as it was to get the digital and to get a paper once a week.
That's very strange.
Yeah, I know. So like I have the digital access, but I don't use it because I don't really like it.
And you have a physical paper, so why would you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Why bother?
Very interesting. I might do that once I get back to North America.
Some hot tips.
So, reason number 9. Social media is making politics impossible.
Yeah, that is unfortunately true from the sounds of it. And from the subjective experienced reality of watching politics right now. Well, not really watching it so much as hearing about it.
Yeah.
On that note, argument 10 is that social media hates your soul.
That is spiritual. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. There's a bunch to this, and it gets into religion and spirituality.
Oh, please read some. I'm into that.
I know, I am too. It's interesting stuff. It's just a little over my head at times. All right, I think this paragraph, or these 2 paragraphs, is a good teaser, and then we'll get into the other stuff too. So he says, Each of the arguments for deleting your accounts is at first glance about a practical issue, such as trust. But on closer inspection, the arguments confront the deepest and most tender concerns about what it means to be a person. When you use Bummer, you implicitly accept a new spiritual framework. It's like the EULA agreement, the user agreement, that you clicked OK on without reading. You've agreed to change something intimate about your relationship with your soul. If you use Bummer, you've probably, to some degree, statistically speaking, effectively renounced what you might think is your religion. Even if that religion is atheism, you have been inducted into a new spiritual framework. I am not speaking rhetorically or being cute. This is a sincere effort to illuminate what is happening.
I mean, on the surface, I kind of disagree. Okay, here's what I've been reading a lot about Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism lately because I've got a book about it that I'm reading. Pretty good. But so basically, I say I disagree because one division between the Abrahamic religions, that is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, versus them and the Eastern religions such as Buddhism, Jainism, Hinduism. Not sure where Sikhism falls in there, but the division partially is that Abrahamic religions rely a lot on rules and ritual, where a lot of Eastern religion is, Abrahamic religion follows a lot of rules specifically, versus a lot of Eastern religions, it's less of a rule, more of a mindset. So myself, being from a Catholic background, an Abrahamic religion, I sort of disagree because it's very easy to find the layout for like Catholicism. It's like follow the 10 Commandments, which social media doesn't cause you to break any of the 10 Commandments. Follow this for like First Communion stuff, the like your confirmation things, and social media doesn't cause you to break any of those. It's not like when you start using Instagram a certain amount, you all of a sudden start coveting your neighbors off. So for Western religions, Abrahamic religions, I find it interferes less. But from what I've been reading about Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, other religions where it's less specific rules based, I think that would definitely be much more of an argument for, because that's more of just a school of thought, a way to interact with the world, which social media and Bummer definitely does change.
Interesting. So you're saying that Abrahamic religions are more so about the kind of social structures that they create than it is about the ideas?
Well, they're more just rule based in general, and so it's very easy to be like, for instance, I don't eat pork, I don't drink alcohol, I pray 5 times a day, and I observe the Sabbath. I can do all those things while going on social media, versus like I find the idea of becoming enlightened while being a heavy Instagram user somewhat dubious.
I don't know. Possibly. Again, I don't fully get it, but I'll go through some of it. He has 4 kind of ideas or principles or arguments about this that he kind of goes into.
Mm-hmm.
The first one comes back to free will and says, in general, religions generally propose that free will is real. It must exist in order for you to choose to change your karma for the better or to make moral choices that get you into heaven. Even the most ethereal Buddhists must start with free will in order to freely seek a state that transcends it. But essentially, in being part of Bummer platforms, you're not totally giving up your free will, but you're giving up part of it, essentially. You're giving up your ability to choose what you're interested in, what you care about, who you talk to, and you're giving that over to someone else. It's essentially transferring a little bit of your free will or of all the users' free will and transferring it to the people running the platforms.
Yeah, I think again, that doesn't hold up as well for things like Catholicism, with his argument like you must have free will to like make choices that make you enter heaven. But I would say that holds up less for that, because there's pretty clear like rules what you have to do to enter heaven, at least for most Christianity types, and social media doesn't get in the way of at least most of them. So no murder, no stealing, no worshiping false gods, none of that. That's pretty easy to do without while still being on social media, because it doesn't say anywhere in the commandments or in the Bible that you must have full free will in order to get to heaven.
Well, free will is a pretty central part of Catholicism, isn't it? That's kind of needed in order for you to do any of the things or to be able to make moral decisions or good decisions.
I don't know, because I would say most people probably take a utilitarian point of view on that, whereas they don't really see it as I must have free will to make these decisions. It's just like, if I make these decisions to do these things, then I'm good. They obviously want free will, but I would say it's not. It's not like in the whole box of things to do in order to follow your religion and get into heaven. It's just sort of like, I think it's also important.
And this is making me want to read more of the History of Western Philosophy book that I have, because I ordered another copy of it, so now I have one. And I stopped right before I got into the Catholic philosophy part of it, which I really want to read and would be interesting.
Oh.
But if I'm not mistaken, a lot of, especially early Catholicism, was based off of Aristotle's works, and they took a lot from his ethics. And I know for certain in his ethics, in order for something to be moral...
He's the virtue ethics guy, right?
Yes, virtue ethics. In order for an action to be moral, you need all of the right intentions. Free will is or the ability to choose or to know that something is good is absolutely essential for it to be moral.
So your choices don't matter if they weren't entirely yours, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Or there's no really moral judgment that you can make there.
So if you did a good thing, but you didn't really have a choice to do the good thing, that doesn't really matter that much. Same with a bad thing.
I think so, yeah. Yeah, in order for something to be moral, it has to be done for the right reasons, to the right people, like with the right motivation, at the right time, all that jazz.
I feel like that's been a little bit lost on Catholicism, but I find that fascinating, and I totally agree with it.
Yeah, I find myself agreeing a little bit as well.
I'm going to be paying more attention at church after COVID to see what sort of connections I can draw to that.
Yeah, that would definitely be interesting. Yeah, again, I definitely want to read more of that book, because I'm sure Bertrand will get more into all of that, all that good Catholic philosophy. But anyways, yeah, I think that free will is a pretty, if not large on like the surface as like what you see, it's still a pretty good, big, like fundamental part of it. I believe I've heard priests say that before, that free will is absolutely essential.
I've definitely heard that too, but they've never brought the Aristotle's school of thought into it. That I think is pretty relevant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree.
Because I feel like the average day-to-day follower of Christ is just sort of it is a very utilitarian sort of checklist. Like, what's this? Murder? Can't do this. What's this? Can't do this. Can do this. Can't do this. Can do this. That sort of thing, but not. It's not fully going into the why am I making this decision? Am I making it for the right reasons or the wrong reasons? Very interesting.
And even from the more utilitarian perspective, you were talking about how being on social media doesn't make you like desire your neighbor's ox anymore. But I think it does. Isn't that like part of the whole point?
Okay, that's true.
Yeah.
Coveting is kind of part of social media. That is true.
That is a very large part of social media.
It does break at least one of the commandments.
Yeah, definitely.
Potentially.
All right, so that was his first argument about spirituality. The second one, I don't feel like this is really an argument as much. But he says it is. Yeah. It feels like a bit more of a meme while I read it. He's essentially comparing himself in this idea of being against bummer companies, but not the internet as a whole, to Protestantism.
That's amazing. That's incredible.
I know, right? I mean, it's not a wrong comparison. The idea is that the Protestants were against things like the indulgences, but not like God or Jesus on the whole. So they just formed their own thing that was like against those specific bad things, and that's what he's trying to do.
Did he have like 90 some reasons? It should be 90 some reasons. Why?
Honestly, he should have. And if he'd gone and like nailed it to one of the doors at like Google or Facebook,
Oh yeah.
that'd been so
That's
good.
so funny. That's a pretty hilarious argument by this man.
Which, I mean, it's definitely hilarious because it like comes off as him thinking of a bit much of himself.